Once there was a young woman named Lily who loved nothing more than to read horror stories. She was fascinated by the dark, twisted tales of love and terror that filled the pages of her favorite books. But despite her love of all things macabre, she had never experienced anything truly frightening herself. One evening, Lily was walking home from the library when she was approached by a handsome stranger. He had piercing blue eyes and dark hair that fell in soft waves around his face. He introduced himself as Thomas and asked if he could walk her home. Lily was hesitant at first, but something about Thomas's charming smile and confident demeanor put her at ease. They chatted about their favorite horror stories and soon discovered they had a shared love of the genre. They exchanged phone numbers and parted ways, with Thomas promising to call Lily soon. Over the next few weeks, Thomas and Lily spoke every day. They talked about everything from horror movies to their deepest fears. Lily found herself drawn to Thomas's dark sense of humor and his willingness to discuss the macabre. But as they grew closer, Lily began to notice strange things happening around her. At first, it was just little things, a creak in the floorboards, a shadowy figure darting across the room. But soon, the supernatural occurrences became more frequent and more terrifying. Lily felt like she was living in one of her favorite horror novels, and she didn't know how to make it stop. One night, as she was lying in bed, Lily heard a knock at the door. She hesitated before getting up to answer it, her heart racing with fear. But when she opened the door, she saw Thomas standing on her doorstep, his eyes blazing with intensity. Without a word, Thomas took Lily by the hand and led her out into the night. They walked through the empty streets, their footsteps echoing through the darkness. Lily didn't know where they were going, but she felt safe with Thomas by her side. Finally, they reached an old cemetery on the outskirts of town. Thomas led Lily to a secluded spot among the gravestones and took her in his arms. For a moment, Lily forgot about the fear that had been plaguing her and gave in to the overwhelming feeling of love and desire she felt for Thomas. But as they kissed, Lily realized that Thomas wasn't just a handsome stranger with a shared love of horror stories. He was something darker, something more dangerous. And as she looked into his eyes, she knew that she had made a grave mistake. In that moment, Lily knew that her love for Thomas was going to be her downfall. But even as she faced her own demise, she couldn't help but be drawn to the forbidden love that had brought her there. It was a horror story come to life, and Lily was powerless to escape its grasp. As the night wore on, Lily and Thomas remained locked in a passionate embrace, their bodies entwined in a dance of love and horror. The moon shone down on them, casting eerie shadows across the gravestones and illuminating the stark beauty of the cemetery. But even as Lily lost herself in the moment, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Thomas's touch was electrifying, but it also sent shivers down her spine. His eyes, once so captivating, now seemed to hold a sinister glint. Lily tried to pull away from Thomas, but he held her tight, his grip like steel. "You can't leave me, Lily," he whispered in her ear. "Not now, not ever." It was then that Lily realized the terrible truth. Thomas was not human. He was a creature of darkness, a being that had no place in a world of mortals, and she had fallen in love with him. But even as Lily tried to come to terms with this realization, Thomas began to change. His skin grew cold and clammy, his eyes turned blood red, and his breath became fetid and foul. Lily screamed, but it was too late. She was trapped in Thomas's embrace, a prisoner to his monstrous desires. As the night wore on, Lily felt herself slipping away, her mind consumed by a dark, otherworldly force. She was no longer in control of her own body. She was a vessel for Thomas's evil, a pawn in his twisted game. And yet, even as she faced the abyss, Lily couldn't help but feel a strange, twisted sense of love for Thomas. His touch, though terrifying, was also intoxicating. His gaze, though sinister, was also mesmerizing, and so she stayed with him, lost in a world of love and horror, unable to escape the terrible fate that awaited her. As the sun began to rise, Lily knew that her time with Thomas was coming to an end. She could feel the darkness receding, replaced by the light of day. But even as she watched Thomas fade away into nothingness, she knew that she would never forget the horror love story that had consumed her soul. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but Lily could not forget the horror love story that had consumed her. She tried to go about her life as usual, but the memories of Thomas haunted her every waking moment. At night, Lily would toss and turn in her bed, plagued by nightmares of the dark, twisted being that had once held her in his embrace. She tried to distract herself with her favorite horror stories, but even they held no solace for her. As the anniversary of her encounter with Thomas drew near, Lily found herself consumed by a strange sense of dread. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, waiting for her, ready to drag her back into his world of darkness and horror. It was then that Lily received a package in the mail, a battered old book, bound in black leather and inscribed with strange, ancient symbols. As she opened the book, she felt a chill run down her spine, as if a gust of cold wind had blown through the room. Inside the book, Lily found a letter written in spidery handwriting. It was from Thomas, or rather, from the being that had once been Thomas. In the letter, he declared his undying love for Lily and begged her to return to him. Lily felt her heart race as she read the letter. She knew she should destroy the book and forget about Thomas, but a part of her longed to be reunited with the dark, mysterious being that had once captured her heart. In the end, curiosity got the better of her. Lily slipped the book into her bag and set out for the cemetery where she had first met Thomas. As she walked through the silent streets, She felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She knew that this was a dangerous game, and yet she couldn't stop herself from playing it. As she reached the cemetery gates, Lily felt a strange sensation wash over her, a feeling of warmth and comfort, as if she had finally found her true home. She stepped inside the cemetery, and there, waiting for her among the gravestones, was Thomas. He looked different now, no longer the dark, twisted creature that had once held her captive. Instead, he was a being of light and beauty, his eyes shining with an inner radiance that took Lily's breath away. "Welcome home, my love," he whispered as he took her into his arms. "You have returned to me at last." Lily knew that she should be afraid, that she should run away from this being that had once terrorized her. But as she looked into his eyes, she realized that she had found her true home in the arms of a creature of darkness, a being of love and horror. And so she stayed with him, lost in a world of twisted, terrible beauty, knowing that she would never leave his side again. As Lily spent more time with Thomas, she realized that he was not the same creature she had encountered before. He was different now, kinder, gentler, and more loving. It was as if the darkness that had once consumed him had been replaced by a new, more benevolent force. Lily spent her days with Thomas, wandering through the cemetery and the surrounding woods, listening to his stories of the ancient beings that once roamed the earth. She learned about the powerful forces that lay hidden in the shadows and the beings that lurked in the darkness. Over time, Lily grew to love Thomas even more deeply, and she found herself drawn to the dark, mysterious world that he inhabited. She knew that it was a dangerous place, full of terrors and unknown horrors, but she couldn't help herself. She was in love with Thomas, and she would follow him to the ends of the earth. But even as Lily basked in the glow of her newfound love, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. There were moments when Thomas would disappear for days on end, leaving her alone in the darkness, and when he returned, he seemed distant, aloof, as if he were hiding something from her. Lily tried to ignore these feelings, telling herself that they were nothing more than her own fears and insecurities. But as time went on, she realized that there was something sinister lurking beneath the surface of their love, something that threatened to destroy everything they had built together. One night, as Lily and Thomas lay in each other's arms, she couldn't help but ask him the question that had been burning in her mind. "Who are you, really?" she whispered. "What kind of being are you?" Thomas hesitated, his eyes searching hers for a moment before he spoke. "I'm not like you, Lily," he said. "I am something different, something other. And I am not alone in this world." Lily felt a chill run down her spine as she heard those words. "What do you mean?" she asked. Thomas took a deep breath, and then he began to tell her the truth about his world, a world of darkness, of monsters and ancient, powerful beings that ruled over all of creation. He told her about the battles that were fought between these beings and the wars that had ravaged entire worlds. Lily listened in horror as Thomas spoke, realizing that the love she had felt for him was only a small part of a much larger, much darker story. She knew then that she had a choice to make, to leave Thomas and return to the world of mortals, or to stay with him and embrace the horrors of his world. In the end, Lily made her choice. She knew that she could never leave Thomas, that she could never turn her back on the love and horror that had consumed her. And so she stayed with him, knowing that their path was a dangerous one, but also knowing that they would face it together, no matter what horrors lay ahead. As Lily delved deeper into Thomas's world, she found herself facing more and more dangers. The creatures that lurked in the shadows were not content to simply watch her from a distance. They began to attack her, to hunt her down, to try and tear her apart. But Lily was not afraid. She had chosen to stay with Thomas, to embrace the horrors of his world, and she would fight to protect the love that they shared. Together, Lily and Thomas traveled through the dark, twisted world of monsters and ancient beings, fighting off attacks from every direction. They battled creatures that seemed to defy description, creatures with tentacles for arms, creatures with wings of fire, creatures that could change their shape at will. But no matter how fierce the battle, no matter how terrible the monsters they faced, Lily and Thomas always emerged victorious. They were two halves of a whole, each complementing the other's strengths and weaknesses, and together they were unbeatable. As the months went on, Lily and Thomas's love only grew stronger. They faced danger after danger, always emerging stronger and more determined than ever. They fought side by side, hand in hand, and nothing could tear them apart. But then one day, everything changed. It started with a feeling, a creeping, nagging sensation that something was wrong. Lily felt it first, a sense of unease that grew stronger with each passing day, and then Thomas began to change. He became distant, aloof, as if he were holding something back. He disappeared for days on end, leaving Lily alone to face the dangers of his world. And when he returned, he seemed different, as if he were no longer the same creature she had fallen in love with. Lily tried to ignore her fears, telling herself that it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. But as the days turned into weeks, she realized that something was terribly wrong. And then, one dark and stormy night, everything came crashing down. Lily was alone in their small cabin, listening to the rain pounding against the roof, when she heard a knock at the door. She opened it, expecting to see Thomas on the other side. But it was not Thomas who stood there. It was a creature unlike any Lily had ever seen. A creature with eyes like embers, a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, and a body that seemed to writhe and twist in the shadows. It spoke in a voice like thunder, and what it said sent chills down Lily's spine. "I am here for Thomas," it said. "He has betrayed us, and he must pay the price." Lily tried to fight, but it was no use. The creature was too powerful, and she was too weak. It took Thomas away, leaving Lily alone in the darkness. She never saw him again. Lily was devastated. She felt as if her entire world had been torn apart, and she had no idea what to do next. For weeks, she wandered through the dark, twisted world that Thomas had introduced her to, searching for any sign of him. But he was gone, vanished without a trace. As she traveled, Lily began to realize that she was not alone. Other creatures began to emerge from the shadows, watching her with curious eyes. At first, she was afraid of them, but as time went on, she began to see that they were not all monsters. There were creatures that were kind, creatures that were gentle, creatures that were just as lost and alone as she was. They welcomed her into their world, showing her a side of it that she had never seen before. And then, one day, Lily stumbled upon a group of creatures that were unlike any she had ever encountered. They were beautiful, with shimmering wings and delicate features, and they welcomed her with open arms. They called themselves the fairies, and they told Lily that they had been watching her for a long time. They knew of her love for Thomas, and they understood her pain. "We can help you," they said. "We can take you to him." Lily was hesitant at first. She had heard stories of the fairies, stories of their trickery and their cruelty, but she was desperate, and she had no other options. So she followed them deep into the heart of their world. They led her through winding paths and misty forests, until they came to a clearing in the center of which stood a tree like no other. It was ancient, with gnarled branches and a trunk that seemed to stretch up into the sky, and on its bark, carved in deep, jagged lines, were the words, "To find love, you must first lose it." The fairies left Lily alone, telling her that she must spend a night in the clearing, alone with the tree. They warned her that it would be dangerous, that she would face many trials before the night was through. But Lily was determined. She sat down at the base of the tree, her back against its rough bark, and prepared herself for whatever was to come. The night was long and dark, full of terrors that she could not have imagined. She was attacked by creatures that seemed to come from nowhere, and she was forced to fight them off with everything she had. But she was not alone. In the darkness, she felt a presence, a familiar presence, one that she had not felt in many long months. And then, as the sun began to rise, she saw him. Thomas emerged from the shadows, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and joy. He told her of his capture, of his imprisonment by the creatures he had once called his own. He told her of his escape, of his long journey back to her, and then he took her in his arms, and they kissed. It was a kiss that lasted for hours, a kiss that spoke of all the pain and all the love that they had shared. And when it was over, they knew that they could face anything, together. They emerged from a clearing hand in hand, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. And as they walked through the twisted world of monsters and ancient beings, Lily knew that she would never be alone again. Lily and Thomas walked hand in hand, their hearts full of love and hope. The journey back to the human world was long and fraught with danger, but they faced it all with a fierce determination. As they traveled, Lily began to notice that the world around them was changing. The darkness that had once enveloped them was slowly lifting, and the creatures that had once been so terrifying were no longer a threat. And then, one day, they emerged from the shadows and found themselves standing at the edge of a bright, beautiful world. The sun shone down on them, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers. They were home. As they walked through the fields of wildflowers, they talked about their plans for the future. They would get married, they decided, and start a life together. They would build a home, have children, and live happily ever after. And so they did. They married in a beautiful ceremony, surrounded by family and friends, and they started a life together. They faced many challenges along the way. The world was still full of darkness and danger, after all, but they faced them all together. They were a team, a force to be reckoned with, and nothing could tear them apart. Years passed, and they grew old together, their love only growing stronger with each passing day. They watched their children grow, and they watched as the world around them change, and when they finally passed away, they did so with smiles on their faces, knowing that they had lived a life filled with love and adventure. Their love story became the stuff of legend, a tale told to children around campfires, a story that inspired generations to come. And though they were long gone, their legacy lived on, a testament to the power of love in even the darkest of times.